Welcome back in, guys, to another episode of Lowell Talks, and today's conversation is going to be centered around 3 cameras that I think in 2020 you should be keeping an eye on, or you should probably already own, coming up next. Alright, for those that are tuning in that aren't camera nerds, probably go ahead and hit that stop button because we are going to be deep diving into one of my most favorite conversations, and that is cameras. Now, 2020 is upon us, and one thing that a lot of us are probably looking for are new cameras, new gear, or new things to kind of up our ante or take our production value to the next level. Now, that brings me into a conversation that I love to have with a lot of people, and that is cameras. And this is going to be more centered around the 3 cameras that I think in 2020, most of us are actually going to be able to afford, and I think that you should probably look into. Now, that leads me to camera number 1. I'm biased, but I've owned this camera and this system for years, and that is the Panasonic GH5. Now, the reason that I bring up the GH5 is for several reasons. When I kind of go look at it online, it's literally only $1,300 currently. With taxes, let's just go ahead and round up to $1,400. But that is ridiculous, and I want you to hear me out why. I use this professionally, I use this personally, and it's made me a lot of money, and it's also covered my butt in a lot of situations, and hear me out why. I'm going to actually start with the cons of this camera, and then I'm going to tell you all the pros because there's just so many more pros, and I just want to kind of at least jump right into the haters and the things that most people will kind of call your bluff on in regards to this camera. Now, low light, is it the greatest thing since sliced bread? Absolutely not, but compared to what most cameras you guys are used to and most situations that many of us are going to get hired to film in, this camera is perfect. Now, hear me out. You can definitely film in the 3200 ISO range, and I actually have specific lenses for scenarios when I'm going to walk into a little bit lower environment. You know, a piece of glass like a 25mm Lumix f1.7, that's going to get you out of a lot of pickles or binds with low light situations. Also, I've got a Canon 50mm f1.8 with the Metabone speed boosters linked up to it. It's going to drop it down to an f1.3. So what am I getting at? The biggest con I can knock this camera for is going to be low light situations and then autofocus. Now, in many scenarios when I'm behind the camera, I'm not even going to be using autofocus anyways. Really, autofocus is only going to come in handy in my particular situation when I'm kind of filming myself. And I have kind of combated that with a few different kind of native lenses that I have found with the new firmware updates and autofocus tracking that honestly, you're going to get pretty good autofocus, and it's definitely usable. And considering that everyone now is watching content on their phones, you really can't even really notice the pulsating unless you're putting that up in full screen. So, 2 big cons about the camera are going to be autofocus and low light. Now let's jump into all the pros because there are so many, and I don't really know where to start other than IBIS. So if you're not familiar with IBIS, that is in-body stabilization. And this camera, I think, is kind of king when it comes to the 3 cameras that we're going to be talking about today. Now, the reason that I bring up IBIS and the reason I bring up in-body stabilization is whether you're a wedding photographer or videographer, or you're just a documentary shooter, or you're just the casual consumer that wants to go out and about and shoot vlogs and just shoot cool video. Well, image stabilization is going to be so key in so many situations, and the reason being is that I think it allows for a lot of the footage that you end up actually shooting to be used. So if I'm out using a Sony or I'm using a Canon and I don't have the dual IBIS with the lens and the body stabilization combined, I find that it's actually really hard to shoot like a 24p or 34 or 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second, holding it handheld and even getting usable footage. Now on the GH5, just about anything that I hold in my hand with that with that IBIS is just going to be awesome. And if you have Lumix lenses, native glass, man, when it paired up with the IBIS is going to be awesome. So stabilization is amazing. And I'm not going to say it's like having a gimbal, but being able to just walk around handheld and get footage that is totally usable right out of the box is a huge plus with the Panasonic GH5. Now, other bonuses of the Panasonic GH5 are how many different recording formats that you you can do 10-bit, you can do 8-bit. I mean, you can do upwards to, I want to say, 180 frames per second HD. You can do 4K 60. I mean, the list goes on and on of all the different recording formats that you can do. And honestly, it has dual card slots. What else can I even list off on it? It's super lightweight. It's got the flip out screen, and overall it's just a beast for most people that don't want to break the bank. And those are the kind of cameras that we're talking about today. So my number one on that list is the Panasonic GH5. Still totally usable in 2020. Actually shoot all my personal videos and my contracted videos on the Panasonic GH5, and currently looking at it on B&H, coming in at $1397. Now that leads me to camera number 2, and this is a camera that I'm very familiar with as well because I shoot with it with one of my clients, and that is the Sony A7 III. Now the A7 III is going to be a beast in low light, and this is why a lot of people tend to flock to it. But similar to the Panasonic GH5, this one has a ton of pros as well, so we're going to start with the cons. And considering that I typically shoot with this camera for work, probably on average about once a week, I've become very familiar with this camera, and I also have a ton of experience with the A7S II because I use that for work as well. So the kind of cons to this camera are going to be, for the most part, stabilization is not even going to be on the same planet as the Panasonic GH5. Another issue that I've had with this camera, only a few times, but it's been very frustrating when it happens, is going to be the overheating. And then also, as I mentioned early, I actually use this A7 III paired up with two A7S IIs, and the one thing that I've just kind of learned is if you put your freaking memory card in this A7 III, pull it out and go put it in another camera, those files are going to be corrupted. And same as if you take from the A7S II, put it in the A7 III, it's going to be corrupted. And I've lost some big projects. Now, I don't know if that's maybe just me, but it is something that's happened to myself and a couple of coworkers on some of our big gigs. So it's just one thing that I would actually put out there as a con. So another con that I just have to touch on regards to the Sonys, as good as they are in low light, they don't offer a lot of different kind of recording formats. Yes, you have plenty of slow motion features and things like that, and you do have 4K, but you can't go over 8-bit, you can't do 10-bit color, and there's just some limitations in regards to unlimited kind of like recording. On a Panasonic GH5, you can hit record and it can go for as long as your cards will go. On the A7S II and even the 3, you're going to have that 30-minute recording time. Now, pros of this camera, low light beast. Oh my gosh, the autofocus is amazing. Slow motion is solid. You can actually use autofocus while doing slow motion in some modes. Also, it comes in at $1,900, which is going to be pretty reasonable. Photos are great. Overall, even the battery life is so much better on the A7 III compared to the A7S II. And like I said, for one of my current employers, they definitely use these cameras for all scenarios paired up with the Rokinon non-cine glass. And overall, it's just a great experience. And there's not many environments that you're going to walk in with the A7S III that you're not going to be able to film, especially if you don't even have that much lighting, considering that even a lot of situations, I can even film at like ISO 4K or 4,000. You could even go up to 5,000. We've done it. I think 7,000 is the most that we filmed at, and the footage is usable. Going to get a little bit of grain, but you're going to be able to walk into any environment, and you know that full frame is just going to be nice to have with the blurry backgrounds and things of that nature. So autofocus is on point. Price is on point, low light is on point, and that is our camera number 2, which leads us into the third and final camera, and that is going to be the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K. Now, have I even touched this camera before? Absolutely not. Coming in at the $2,500 mark, which is pretty reasonable for what this camera is going to be packing. The reason that I bring it up, one of my good friends out in California who owns a small production company has just recently purchased this camera and has been on many shoots where guys were using this camera, kind of pair it up with some Reds or pair it up with even some other genres of cameras, some Canons, things of that sort. What I've heard is that the battery life absolutely sucks on this camera, but footage is unbelievable. The ProRes RAW is amazing. The Blackmagic RAW is amazing. And a huge upside of this camera is it has the Canon EF mount. So what does that even mean, or in layman terms? That means for a lot of us out there that are Canon users and have spent money on Canon glass, your glass is going to be able to connect directly on this camera. And 6K at that $2,500 price mark is ridiculous. I've also heard that the screen is pretty sweet. Now, it isn't flip out, which is going to be a little difficult if you're a vlogger or anything, trying to get those low level shots. But overall, I have heard this camera is a beast. And a buddy of mine literally texted me the other night and he purchased one as well. So those are my top 3 kind of cameras that I think many of you should probably be keeping an eye on this year, 2020, to not break the bank, to deliver products that are absolutely amazing, and honestly just keep upping that video game without breaking the bank, without just hurting the pocket, and honestly just putting yourself in a win-win situation. So hey guys, it's Trey Lowell with Lowell Talks. I hope you enjoyed that conversation, and I will see you in the next photography, videography, cinematography, video editing, social media video. I'm out.